Hi, this is Michelle Bach. This is our third video in a series on how to stay positive through organizational change. If you're a leader and you're leading a team through a difficult change, maybe one that wasn't your idea, maybe one that you are also implicated in, as happens very often when we have restructuring or reorganization in many companies, this is a series for you to help you kind of organize your thoughts and your feelings, put forward an authentically positive face as you lead your team through that change. In our first video, we talked about the challenge that many leaders feel where they feel like they have to fake enthusiasm or positivity for the change. We've talked about why that doesn't work and how people can always tell if you are not being honest with how you are really thinking about the change. In the last video, we talked about some strategies to just get acquainted with what your genuine reaction is and just to accept it, even if we know that it's not maybe necessarily helpful in putting that positive view towards the change. But how that also brings us closer to being able to empathize with the people that we're leading and have an honest conversation about that. Today, I'd like to talk about some strategies for helping you to genuinely feel grounded and balanced as you move forward in a time of uncertainty. So, one of the strategies that I think is so important just comes down to broadening our perspective. This is something that's, really ancient wisdom. I'm a big fan of Stoic philosophy. A lot of Buddhist thinking as well takes these perspectives. And the idea being that, when we look at change, it's very easy for us to get overwhelmed in the moment and to assume that whatever that we're dealing with, that intensity of fear or the anxiety that's there, that is always going to be present. It's absolutely not true. We navigate through change, and change ebbs and flows over time. So, something that might have felt really, really difficult when it started, over time, you develop the strategies to learn how to deal with it. And then you might not even think about it anymore. So, I'm sure that you can think in your personal life of several examples of dealing with some significant change where you learn to manage it over time. So that's part of it is taking that longer term perspective, looking at the change within the context of your organization, of the situation that you're under, and just realizing that, kind of in a broader view, this is just one moment in time that we can navigate through. The other thing, that I want to share with you is thinking about, reframing our thoughts. So very often we get stuck in these negative spirals because our thoughts are fueling negative emotions. Some of those thoughts might be what psychologists will call irrational thoughts or distorted thinking, where we're predicting things about the future when we don't actually have any evidence that it will come to pass in that way. We might be doing some mind reading and thinking that we know what other people will react or how they will react or what they will say or do in response to a given change. These aren't things that we actually know, and so they're not, because they're not grounded in a factual basis, they're irrational. And so they cause us anxiety and fear even though they will never come to pass. So as much as we can identify these things, we can remove the unnecessary stress and struggle that we have often in change and just focus on what are the things that we need to do to productively move forward. So we want to remove any extraneous self-imposed stress and anxiety, and we can do that by inspecting our thinking. This is something that can be easier to do in conversation with another person. So if you're working with a coach, cognitive coaching is one way that as coaches we support people who are dealing with difficult change and helping them to look at their own mental self-talk and how that's influencing their feelings about what they have in terms of options for moving forward. The other strategy I want to share with you is one that I'm sure you've relied on many, many times, but maybe it just hasn't occurred to you in this moment, and that's to reach out to someone in your community to talk to about it. So when we realize that we're not the only person that's struggling with this kind of situation, when we are able to talk to others, we don't feel so alone and isolated. And that is one of those things that happens very often when we're dealing with a difficult problem, especially as leaders, where we feel like we need to, be that strong person for the team. When we have a space that we can let down and just acknowledge how we're actually feeling, it makes it a lot easier for us to go back in front of that team and be grounded, be authentic, and as much as possible, put a positive perspective on how we're going to move forward. So if you don't have a community like that, I would encourage you to figure out, some ways of connecting with others. If you're interested, I have a community that we're starting for change leaders dealing with exactly these problems. I'll put some notes in the in the comment below for information about that. If you're struggling with these types of issues and really wishing that you had some additional support, I'm going to share some information about a special opportunity coming up in July for change leaders who are dealing with exactly these kinds of situations. So stay tuned for that. I'll have that in just a minute.